Welcome to Advocacy Talks, a podcast from the advocacy team at Vision Ireland. Here's what's coming up on this episode.
The cost of disability is one that a lot of people are there's a lot of anger about that and a lot of disappointment across the community, and a lot of people will have known that it was in the programme for government that it'd be introduced over the lifetime of the government. So that's a 5 year time frame, but people can't wait 5 years for a cost of disability payment.
And now here's Madeline McNamara.
Hello everybody, and you're so welcome to Advocacy Talks. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. You may remember that in our last podcast I spoke to Sean Moyles from Vision Sports Ireland, and he told us about his fascinating research that he's currently doing into the physical literacy of people with acquired sight loss. So if you haven't already, please do check out his survey, which is on the visionsports.ie website. I know he would really appreciate your help with that. So today we're going to be talking about something which affects absolutely everybody in Ireland, and that is Budget 2026. So to help me discuss that very important topic, I'm joined by my colleague and teammate, Jamie Millar, who is the Policy Officer for Vision Ireland. So Jamie, thank you so much for coming on to Advocacy Talks today.
Thanks, Madeline. Happy to be here.
Oh, very good. We're delighted to have you, and because you're the expert in all things budget, so we couldn't do it without you. And so I guess we just might jump straight in and sort of see if you can kind of outline for us what would be the major takeaways from the budget that would, I guess, have an impact or affect people who are blind or vision impaired.
Sure, yeah. So I suppose to put it in some context, I guess the budget, we hear every year about the budget, but it's a very small proportion of, I guess, what the government actually spends and how much it takes to run the country. It's cost about 120 billion to run the country each year, and there's always a kind of leftover amount after everyone, the state gets tax receipts, and there's some flexibility each year to add in new measures beyond maintaining the existing services and the existing services that exist. So this year that's just 9 billion of that 120 billion, and it's usually thereabouts that amount. So that's the kind of the budget package that you hear about for new tax and spending changes. So it's all about things that the government will do differently each year. So I suppose this year's budget, if we look back to last year's, it was a lot different. You might remember, they had about 8 billion to spend last year, and there's 2 billion of that was on these cost of living one-off measures. So everyone was getting these one-off payments, which went down quite nicely with all the voters just before the election. And I think another 2 billion was on cutting taxes and income tax cuts. So that was that's a lot different to what we saw this year. So budget 2026 was quite a pivot. So there was no kind of, went from sort of household supports to a lot of kind of investment and business supports, capital spending, all the important stuff, but stuff that isn't really as popular. And obviously there was a lot of disappointment last week. So there was no income tax cuts, and there was none of these cost of living measures that we saw. Really, I suppose the main piece was probably the VAT cuts. That was kind of the headline measures for hospitality and the construction sector.
Yeah. So, we did see some modest sort of increases, if you like, for people in terms of increases on the weekly social welfare payments, wasn't it? €10 a week for those?
Yeah. There was definitely some positives on the social welfare changes, but they're very, very modest changes altogether. So, the positives would be, there's quite a good increase in what's called the increase for a qualified child. So any kind of welfare payment you're receiving, if you have a dependent child, then that money goes up. So that was actually quite a significant increase, and I think it was more than some advocacy groups that had actually called for. So that was positive. Obviously, we welcome the.
So is that on top of? Because I was saying that. So say the disability allowance or blind pension has gone up to 254, is it? And then is that child thing on top of that? So if you had a dependent child,
all the core rates went up €10.
Yeah.
And then if you have a child, your increase is already a certain amount, but it's increased by a further, I think, €8 if they're under 12, and over 12 is a different amount, which is
16, I think, euro,
yeah,
wasn't it, if they were over
€16.
12?
So that's gone up a good amount. So that would be good. There are some other things
But,
that we could welcome. The carers allowance changes to that as well. The
mm,
minimum wage went up. These are all good things, but probably not in the to the extent
mm,
that that's required.
the-
But
the-
yeah,
yeah, a bit of an increase in the fuel allowance, but I don't think it kind of changed from a one-off. I think last year there was a €300 extra payment, whereas this year it's kind of been a €5
yeah. So
weekly
the
increase.
net result there is that there's going to be less in terms of
Yeah.
the fuel allowance, but the eligibility was widened a little bit, and there's a kind of a useful change where disability allowance and blind pension, if you enter the workforce and go off those payments, that you'll now retain your fuel allowance for 5 years. So that's a big problem around losing. People are worried about losing their sort of secondary benefits, medical card, free travel pass, and fuel allowance. So that's a start with kind of decoupling those, because that's been a big problem for a long time.
Absolutely. It really is a problem if you do want to get back into work, but you don't want to lose this benefit. So you will see, so now you keep your fuel allowance for 5 years. You keep obviously your free travel pass, because that's not income dependent anymore
Mm.
for people with blind or vision impaired. And the medical card, what's the situation for that?
There was no changes. I'm not sure what the situation is with the medical card. There's certain payments I think you might retain it for 2 years, but don't quote me on that. There was no
I
change
think
anyway in the budget.
because it's very much income dependent, isn't it? So I guess it maybe depends on what level of employment you go into. Maybe I don't know
Yeah.
on that one. But yeah. So some, as you say, some increases, but it was certainly very disappointing that there was nothing in terms of a specific payment to deal with the cost of disability.
Yeah, no, it's a lot easier to. There's a lot more to say about what wasn't there, I suppose, in the budget in terms of social welfare. Obviously, there was that €10 increase to all the core rates, so your
Mm,
blind pension, disability allowance will go up €10, but that's really an inadequate increase for what's needed. There's really nothing for low or middle income workers at all, really. No kind of targeted action for you know people with disabilities, households and poverty, children with poverty. That was quite disappointing, I suppose. The cost of disability is one that a lot of people are there's a lot of anger about that, and a lot of disappointment across the community, and a lot of people will have known that it was in the program for government that it'd be introduced over the lifetime of the government. So
mm,
that's a 5 year time frame, but people can't wait 5 years for a cost of disability payment, because a lot of people are struggling with the extra costs that come with sight loss and any other kind of impairment, and it's not fair that should be borne by them alone. So the state needs to do something there, but it's been put off really for another year at least, unfortunately, which is very disappointing.
yeah, and we were kind of hopeful that it would happen, because they just launched their, the national strategy. I'm messing up the title. The human rights strategy for
Mm.
people with disabilities, or for disabled people. We've got to get the term right. And that outlined the commitment even in that for cost of disability. So it was hoped that because of that launch so close to budget, that we might see something. So who knows what the thought process is there.
Yeah, no, it was disappointing, especially with the timing of that. I don't think it really matched the words that were used in the launch of that strategy. We didn't see that anyway last Tuesday on budget day.
No.
No.
I mean, we did though see, big increases in spending on services, so to departmental spending. So do we know any more about that, in terms of what that might go towards, in terms of the budgets to the various departments that would, I guess, impact people?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, there's definitely, it's fair to say there's been an increase, I suppose, in the Department of Children and Disabilities allocation. So that's obviously
Mm,
positive, and for disability services and specifically, there's a 20% increase on the funding that they got last year. So I suppose in the government's eyes, that's sort of this marks the kind of change, in like the step change that they've been talking about in disability services. But it is
mm,
focused on very specialist services. So majority of the money is going to go on residential facilities, and also on respite. So there's, I think, 1,400 new day services places. Obviously, that's a going to take a big chunk, but that's obviously very positive. A lot more extra, respite day sessions and night sessions, additional PA and home support hours, and I think that's hiring of new staff for the CDNTs. But
and that is something that will hopefully maybe have a positive impact for our service users, because it is something that people are crying out for, really, is increased access to personal assistance services in particular.
Yeah, definitely. There's a massive unmet need there in terms of home support and the PA as well, and obviously we have our day services as well. So there's that'll filter on down, but we'll see. There's more detail to be worked out.
I saw as well there was increased spending on additional posts in terms of, say, for special needs assistants in schools, increase in numbers and there, which I think is positive, for people that do have children with disabilities. So that is something that's good. But yeah, as you say, we don't know the full details yet of where all the additional spending will be spent. Transport, hopefully, would be good.
Yes.
But I don't know whether there's I don't know whether there's new spending or whether it's just fulfilling commitments already made, in terms of there is increased rollouts in terms of local link services, that's bus services for rural Ireland. Obviously, the Metro link was just got through its approval. So, yeah.
Yeah, Metrolink will take a bit of that, but I suppose, there was an additional 2 billion more than there was last year in this budget on infrastructure. So that is going to be a lot of transport, also on energy and facilities and housing as well. But there will be a lot on transport. But we'll see how that goes. Obviously, there's a lot of poor provision in rural Ireland specifically. So we're hopeful that there'll be some changes there.
Yeah, and I guess just going now to our submission, it's a huge sort of project for you. It's one of the big sort of things during the life of a policy officer would be the budget submission every year. And what were kind of our key asks, and did we have any success really in getting what we wanted or not?
Yeah, no, it is a big part of my work. I suppose each summer takes up a lot of the summer. So the pre-budget submission, I suppose, is our kind of attempt for Vision Ireland to influence the budget. The budget is all about choices, as Pascal Dummy is always very fond of saying. So it is about making sure that the choices that are made are ones that benefit people who are blind or vision impaired as much as possible. So that's the kind of basis for our pre-budget submission. So this year it was 14 different asks or recommendations or requests for various departments to implement. So on the social protection, that was the cost of disability was the main one, which I mentioned. So that's why we were very disappointed, along with every other disability group and every other advocate out there. So we were requesting a payment of at least €55 per week as a start. We're also requesting an increase for all social welfare payments increased by €16. It was only €10, which wasn't enough at all either. And there was the blind tax credit is a usual kind of mainstay of our budget submissions, that there would be an increase that year. So we did have an increase in that last year, so that was successful, and we were happy about that. That went up from $16.50 to $19.50, and that was long overdue. So that was a big win. But as we know, this year there was no changes at all to tax credits or the tax bans for anybody, let alone the blind tax credits. So there was no success on that one.
Yeah. And just to be clear, that's for people who are in employment who can get an additional tax credit if they're blind or vision impaired. So that is definitely something that's very, very useful to have. But yeah, so overall, but I mean, yeah, not great for anybody. And we weren't, as you say, the lack of success was not just for us, it was across the disability sector. So it wasn't any reflection on anything that we did. It was just the way the government chose to go this year. But in terms of just maybe letting people know what's involved in the pre-budget submission, when do you kind of start the work on it? Because obviously the budget's October, and when do you have to start the preparations for that, and what's involved?
I suppose it's better to get in as early as possible, really. So probably around May. We'd send out the biggest part in the process in terms of preparing is talking to our service users and advocates and people that we work with. So we'd put out quite a large survey, try to reach as many as possible. asking people, to just help us decide what we should prioritize in the submission. What do they want a government to do in each area, whether that's transport, health, any kind of department. So this year, I think we got a very good take up. We had 560 total suggestions that were in there in all
That's
responses.
great.
So yeah, so there's a process there, obviously, in terms of parsing through that and trying to see what crops up, the same ideas from different people, time and again. There's trying to identify, what's realistic. Some things will be an non-starter just on, feasibility or politically, not as palpable or palatable. So it's difficult to prioritize, and obviously we can't put 560. So we have to limit it kind of to around 20. It's not really one of those things where throw the kitchen sink at it. It's better to it's more easier for us to be able to prioritize certain ones and really campaign on those individually and contact as many people, whoever will listen, the policymakers and decision makers on each of those kind of key asks.
Yeah, because you have to find ways of justifying those. So, you mean the submission is backed up by kind of evidence, isn't it? And, data that you've gathered, I suppose, is a big part of it, kind of laying out where the deficiencies in funding or services are. So that
exactly.
is
It
a
all
big
comes down to
part.
money. So at the end of the day, each of the asks will be connected to a cost. So we'll say you should do this, and it'll cost this amount, and that kind of does the work for them in terms of those calculations. But obviously, they need to be money is what it comes down to. So calculations have to be made there.
Yeah. So you've got to be good at maths, Jamie, and good at and very good at putting in nice diagrams into your submission. I was very impressed that you're very good at putting like a map in with kind of figures in the various locations. Say whether that's for, personal assistance services or things like that. It really outlines the sort of deficits in the different areas and stuff like that, which I think is really good. I know maybe people who can't see. Those tools aren't obviously necessarily useful, but visually they really do, I think, make a strong statement to be able to look at that and see what's going on. So that's fantastic, So
all politics is local, as they say.
Yes, absolutely. It certainly seems to be. So yeah, I mean, I think disappointing overall, but put our best foot forward on it, and hopefully next year we will be able to have a bit more success if the government in its second budget of this term, it really does need to step up to the plate in terms of the cost of disability in particular, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It's the first budget of 5 for this government. So, there is a hope that they'll, this is the year that they'd make maybe less, electorally appreciated choices, in terms of investment into kind of long-term, capital spending. So if there's any year to do it, it's probably this year. If they're looking at the long term. So, hopefully that might have been what was at play to some extent, and we'll see. We'll continue advocating throughout the lifetime of this government, and hopefully we'll see a lot better next year, because people deserve a lot better than that.
I hope so. Absolutely. Well, I just thought it might be nice to kind of talk a little bit to you and find out about you, because you're fairly new to Vision Island. Well, you've been here over a year now. So was it June or July last year that you started?
It was June, the start of June. So not too long, really, in the grand scheme.
Yeah, and I think a policy officer is often kind of a bit hidden from service users, because you're there in the background putting together all these documents, collecting the data and doing the research and putting forward in submission. So it would be a bit nice to find out a bit more about what your role is, and obviously the pre-budget is a big part, but do you give us any idea of any other kind of things that you'd be involved in?
Yeah, sure. I suppose in a nutshell, it's my job is identifying any opportunities where we can inform on the development of policy and services, and also influence that, and like I said, choices. It's all about choices. So trying to influence the policymakers, so the politicians and the governments to make choices that are maximizing the participation of people who are blind and visually impaired in society. That's Vision Ireland's end goal. So, seizing those opportunities wherever they might crop up. So I suppose a lot of it is kind of monitoring politics and policy, and monitoring the developments that are going on, because sight loss affects every area of it's not just one department that's affected. So you kind of have to have a good kind of awareness of what's going on, whether that's legislation or changes, and keeping an eye on things, and if things are moving in the wrong direction, pushing back and advocating. So I suppose the budget process, like I spoke about there, is the pre-budget is a long, that's a major element, I suppose, in terms of the summer. Thinking back to last year, there were quite substantial processes in terms of around the time of the election, going out and communicating, putting communications out to our advocates. These are, when they get doorstepped, these are the sort of things that you want to raise. These are the issues.
Yeah.
And then of course straight after the election, it's forming a government, and agreeing on a program for government. So that was another opportunity, for us to get things on politicians' radar and say, we need this included in the program for government. This is what matters to us. So there's always opportunities like that. There's regular submissions as well. Anytime the government will introduce a new strategy, a new policy, or they're planning on developing something, or planning on making a change to a service. Thankfully, this wasn't always the way in public policy, but thankfully there's consultations now with the public, and particularly with people with lived experience with disabilities and disability groups. Getting better. They could be better, but things are improving that way. So thankfully, there's opportunities for us to inform, to be a part of that, make submissions, written submissions, attend consultation events, roundtables with all the different stakeholders, and make engagements, whatever that way. So that's a lot of my role as well, the day to day.
Yeah, and I think we have the UNCPRD, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, to thank for a lot of that, in terms of the requirement now on government to engage with people with lived experience and people with disabilities in its policy formation.
Yeah, exactly. There's an obligation there to engage directly and consult, and co-participation, co-design. Those are all that's the order of the day. So yeah, it's very positive.
Yeah, it is very positive, and there's always more to do. And it's, as you say, your job sort of encompasses everything, the whole of government and all of the various things. So keeping abreast of what's going on, watching lots of Oireachtas things, I imagine, and
some less interesting than others, but yeah, keeping an eye on it all.
Yes, because we were at the Oireachtas recently. Was that last night you were there? Or?
Yes, at the time we're speaking now, I was there last night, just in relation to cost of disability. Obviously, as I said, there's a lot of disappointment around the lack of an introduction of a cost of disability payment. So there was an opposition. Sinn Féin introduced a private member's bill, so an opposition motion, to call on the government to introduce that payment, as soon as possible, and certainly by January as an interim measure. Now it wasn't supported by government, but it wasn't opposed by it. Obviously, with the arithmetic of the Oireachtas, it's not opposition bills won't generally be carried, but obviously there is a understanding. They didn't oppose it, so there is an understanding that something does need to be done on this soon. So we're going to keep on putting the pressure on, and that was what that was part of the purpose of last night, to put the pressure on over the next few months, particularly over winter.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it's great to have, obviously, very passionate about it and putting in a lot of hard work there. And, these things are a long process. There's no easy fix, is there? It is challenging. So, we really do appreciate all the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for, coming and talking to us about it all today. Obviously, it's made things hopefully a lot clearer for people. It's in terms of the budget. But if you do have any questions, there is a statement on our website. But you can also email us at campaigns@bi.ie, and we can try and answer any questions that you might have. And obviously, just to remember that if anybody listening does require any services from Vision Ireland, if you're dealing with sight loss and need any assistance, you can always go to our website, which is www.vi.ie. and you can call our info line at 1800 911 250. That's 1800 911 250. So thank you so much for listening today, and we hope you'll join us next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Advocacy Talks. To get in touch with our advocacy team, send us an email to campaigns@vi.ie, or why not join one of our local advocacy networks, where you can work together with others to solve some of the biggest problems facing blind and partially sighted people in Ireland. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.